We discuss ghosts, souls, and death. There's some human universals. We've talked about them before. We come back to them again. Every culture has a concept of the soul and an afterlife, but death is a biological occurrence with a myriad of cultural interpretations. But let's start by looking at the soul. The soul is defined as the non corporeal spiritual component of an individual. In anthropology, we see that as being exclusive to humans. While other cultures may recognize the soul, in anthropology, we speak about it and write about it and study it from the perspective of it's something that can be found in humans. In many cultures, the idea is that the soul departs from the body during the sleep and it travels through space and time and it meets all kinds of people, including relatives, and has all types of experiences. And then the soul departs the body during a trance or through illness or permanently upon death. So let's continue on with our exploration of the soul. Where does the soul reside? And how many souls does an individual have? This answer, as you probably have guessed, is answered differently depending upon culture. For example, among the Jivaro in Ecuador, each individual has three souls. Nekis, the life force, Aratam, which is acquired through visions, is necessary to reach the afterlife or what's known as the real life, and Miyusak, which is the avenging soul that resides in the head and avenges the death of the deceased. The Egyptians, on the other hand, believe in as many as anywhere from 4 to 9 separate souls. And this slide depicts some of them. As Joshua Marcus said, the soul was not only one's character, but a composite being of different entities, each of which had its own role to play in the journey of life and afterlife. Now we'll talk about death and the afterlife. So, where and what is the afterlife? There's several terms we want to look at. One, transmigration, and that's where the soul passes from one body to another. And in this case, here we're expanding that to talk about in terms of human, animal, and the soul of inanimate objects, because there are cultures who do believe that even inanimate objects possess a soul. Reincarnation is a belief in an immortal, eternal soul that is born again and again in different bodies. Interestingly, to many people, is the fact that over 70% of the world's religions have this idea or belief in reincarnation at their core. In Hinduism, the goal of reincarnation or samsara is to obtain moksha or liberation from the limitations of space, time, and matter. The idea of karma is the cumulative result of actions, either good or bad, from previous lives. Good actions equal good karma and the eventual attainment of moksha. In Buddhism, reincarnation is seen as the transmission of karma, but not of personality, as it is in Hinduism. The ultimate goal of reincarnation in Buddhism is the cessation of desires and cravings. And only if this is achieved may one achieve nirvana. In Roman Catholicism, there's the idea of purgatory, and that's a place where souls go that are in a state of grace but need purification. Another aspect of the afterlife involves our ancestors. Ancestor worship is a catch all term that's used by anthropologists to describe beliefs and behaviors surrounding the veneration of ancestors. The idea of or the term ancestor worship is slowly falling out of favor because in some cultures, ancestors are seen as being venerated and attended, but not really worshiped. In Japan, ancestors are seen as dead regular household members that are not in living memory. So we're talking about people who have um, died and passed on for a long time. Upon death, the soul will wander in uncertainty for a few days until it's purified by a series of rituals performed by the family. Once these cleansing rituals are complete, then the soul is believed to enter the clean and peaceful world of the ancestors. And in Japanese society, the dead carry a moral authority, and there's the perceived ability that they can lay down morals and values within the family. So one doesn't want to do wrong for fear of shaming the ancestors. So now let's turn to the idea of death itself. We look now at determining death. What is the body? What animates the body? What is consciousness? Is someone dead when their heart stops, but the brain keeps on working? How about the other way around? The brain stops, but the heart keeps on working. We know that in the 18th and 19th century, there were pull cords that were installed in coffins because there were people that were thought to be dead and they were buried in a coffin, but then they would ring the bell, which would let people know that they were still alive. And a lot of it, again, has to do with when and how cultures define death, when a person is no longer alive. Which brings us to the question that where's the seat of the soul? What is the seat? Which is the seat of the soul? Is it the heart? Is it the brain? If we take the approach nowadays for modern medicine, when the brain is no longer functioning, we'll say oftentimes a person is brain dead. And while their heart might still be beating, because their brain no longer functions, they're identified or categorized as being dead. In the case of ancient Egypt, when the heart stopped, the idea then that the person was dead. That in the mummification process, the heart was specially preserved in a scarab, like you can see in this particular slide. I'm ending with a brief story about a video that I sometimes show that has to do with the idea of death. And in this video, there's a woman who's a part of a culture that believes that when a person no longer can speak, no longer has the ability to speak, then they are assumed to be dead. And in this case, this woman no longer can speak. So they take her to a grave that has been prepared. They lay her down in the grave. And while she has use of her limbs and she's moving around, the other body parts seem to be fine because she's unable to speak. That particular group views her as being dead. So they started to cover her with palm fronds and shovel dirt on her. And people in the class will oftentimes ask me, well, they're going to come back and dig her up or they're going to come and get her out. And my answer is no, because in that particular culture, she is considered dead, even though we watching the video see her being able to move around. And our idea of death and the idea of death in that culture are not the same.